Alrighty, we are all set.
All right. Good morning. I hope everybody is having a good morning and is awake, I guess. I know that we have remote employees these days, and we have employees in California and New Mexico and Washington, and having them do meetings for us sometimes means that it's 6 a.m. for them, and we're very cognizant of the difference in time change. So thank you for having me. I know that we tried to do this earlier and we had some scheduling issues and so forth. And I want to apologize on my side of things because the young lady who was such a powerful influence in trying to reopen conversations with California, Maddie Katz, ended up finding her dream job with Planned Parenthood. And so she left us. And so we kind of dropped the ball a little bit as well. So, I mean, taking some accountability, I want to apologize for that. I do have prepared remarks and prepared slides, but I think it might be good to start out with a conversation and kind of treat it that way first, and so ask some questions, and maybe you can have some questions you might want to preload, and then we can see whether or not my prepared slides would cover those for you. Does that work for you guys? Okay, great. I have two people on camera right now, right? So I guess what we should first start out with is that I should ask, did anybody at any point have an Educators Rising program around 2017, 18, 19? No. Okay. Does anybody remember Future Teachers of America or Future Educators of America and so forth? So let's just, and there's a slide I have on my deck, but let's just get it out of the way. Educators Rising is actually a rebrand of Future Educators Association. All right. So in 2015, we did a rebrand, and I'll get to that in the slides. And so the other thing is, I guess, maybe let's do it this way. If you wouldn't mind, if you have specific questions that you want me to cover, if you might do that in the chat, I will go through the slide deck and see if it covers it. And then we'll follow up at the end and see if it covered the questions itself. Okay, let me share my screen. And we won't do every slide per se, but if you have questions, please do speak up and we will address them as we go. First of all, those of you who just joined us, I went to high school in Irvine. I went to Irvine High School. I went to Sierra Vista Middle School, which was a brand new school at the time in Irvine. Before that, I went to Lincoln Elementary School in Cupertino, and before that I went to Stevens Creek Elementary School in Cupertino. So California is very near and dear to my heart. My parents still live in Irvine, and we used to have a fairly strong presence there with Educators Rising, and have since not had such, and would love to reopen the conversation. Educators Rising, well, first of all, can you see my screen? What do you guys see? Do you see the slide?
Community growth slide.
Oh, wow. Well, you're showing the wrong screen then. Let me move to the other one. I apologize, because I realized that it doesn't look right to me. It would work either way. But now do you see who will be the next generation of teachers, blah, blah, blah? Yes. Okay, we can. Thank you so much. All right, so let's see if we can make this work. We'll skip the title slide. Skip me. So I am the acting CEO. I've been acting CEO now for the last 4 months. Prior to that, I was the chief operating officer for PDK for the last 7 years. Excuse me. In that time, we made that transition from Future Educators Association to Educators Rising. And it was based on this concept here, just this data point that we had, which is if we're looking at teachers, and we're looking at teachers from a grow your own standpoint, from a cyclical standpoint, which many states do a great job with, and California has a really good program on. The driving stat that we always fall back on is this idea that 60% of teachers work within 20 miles of where they attended high school. And what that said to us is that if we have this association of ours, of these after school clubs, Future Educators of America, Future Educators Association, why don't we empower those kids to work with the school, work with the local university, work with any funders in the area that might be helpful, and make a pathway and ensure a pathway, if at all possible, for these kids to become teachers in their near their districts. The problem, as you guys already know, I mean, so we do a PDK poll every year, and we've done it for 55 years now, and it's the longest policy poll of any of its kind of any topic. And in the time that we've been doing this poll, not just this whole 30% of new teachers leave their profession, but as of 2018 was a Sputnik moment for us. For the very first time, parents stopped recommending education. The majority of parents stopped recommending education as a viable career option for them, like a desired career option for them. And that's really startling and frustrating for all of us. Nationally, there's been a 35% drop in attendance in teacher prep programs between 2009 and 2018, and California specifically has a 43% drop. So when we were re-envisioning what Future Educators Association should be, we kind of took a look and said, how can we help solve some of these problems, the shortage problem and the diversity problem? So in the time that we've spent since reinventing ourselves, so 250,000 kids have come through us since Future Teachers of America was conceived in 1937 through the NEA. In the time that we've had it since 1994, since we converted ourselves to Educators Rising, focused on curriculum, focused on competitions, engagement, and creating it as a movement, 103,000 of those 250,000 came through us in that period, in the last 7 years. So changing what we did made kids want to join more. And we're seeing an uptick, even as the perception of education as a great career option starts to fall in the media. We're seeing a growth in Educators Rising. In teacher diversity, as you all know, 82% of the teacher workforce is white, 77% are women, so 79% of teachers are white women. The national population in census had 53% of students identifying as students of color, right, as non-white. And in California, that's much higher, as you know, also it's 78%. In doing the program that way we do, so we don't come in and swoop in and try to change or any kind of activity. We instead are very community focused, community based. Educators Rising doesn't have to be a curriculum that you use. It could be it could still be a club. It could be a chapter. It could be many different ways. But just getting the idea of providing a network for students to be amongst others that believe that this is their calling is the goal of the program itself. And so it's no surprise that our student membership reflects the numbers of the people they're in. In fact, we don't even really talk so much about diversity as we talk about reflecting. We want educators to reflect the communities that they serve, right? So 53% of Educators Rising students currently identify as students of color. In California, when we were still active in California with 3,218 Ed Rising members, 79% identified as non-white, as students of color as well. So we do reflect the communities that we're in, and we are providing an opportunity to see these students become teachers in their communities. Our mission and vision you can find on our website. I mean, basically a clear pathway for a new generation of educators to change the face of teaching, specifically on the shortage and the diversity issues. We referenced the history a little bit earlier, that we were Future Educators Association. And something important happened in 2020 during the pandemic. PDK as an association decided to commit all of its resources towards Educators Rising as its primary mission. Up until then, we have been doing many different things for many different groups, including central office work. We have been supporting research, but we realized that this is the one space that we can make a big difference. So we used the opportunity during the pandemic to rebrand ourselves, refocus our work. in that period of time too, our curriculum, for instance, was as many lesson plans are in PDFs and teachers put together things. We spent a fair amount of money and 2 months of straight work converting everything to PowerPoint-driven lessons that can be delivered on any LMS platform. And so we were able to continue the growth of Educators Rising even during the pandemic, even when many other CTEs and clubs were unable to hold their meetings. We were still able to keep growing in that period of time. We do have a national presence. So we do have presence in all 50 states in the District of Columbia. We have 36 affiliate agreements with the State Department of Education to use Perkins dollars in many of those states. California used to be one of ours, as I've referenced in this presentation, but has in 2019, the state regional coordinator decided not to continue, and we weren't able to make sure that the presence was continued. So this conversation that I'm having with you and with the with Superintendent Thurman, with CTA and so forth, is to kind of see whether or not we can make a difference once again in California. Ideally for us, and many of you probably already are working on things like this, we have chapters and conferences and companies. We have a group in high school who's excited and empowered and wants to be a teacher. They're advocates and activists about education. They do some sort of curricular program with some clinical experience, credit at the local university. That local university or college has some sort of preferred enrollment for these students who are geared in that direction, who have a lower chance of dropping out, so the higher retention for the enrollment. And then there's a job waiting for them back at the district that they started with. This is our ideal scenario, and it's something that is really important to me recently, because I heard many, many stories of our graduates who, as students of color, as male students of color specifically, would go back to a school, and if the school wasn't prepared to receive them, then we would have a situation where they would drop out and not be retained, right? I had a story of a gentleman as a African-American teacher who was not allowed to have meetings with his students in his classroom behind closed doors because of some suspicion of whatever he might be doing. So he was forced to have meetings in the hallway by his school, and so he dropped out of education. So one of the things that we're working on in Educators Rising is that when we have our curricular program in place, the students are learning, the teacher leaders that are leading those students are learning, and those students are helping educate the overall environment, helping you make culture shifts so that you can have a different population of teachers teaching in an environment that's warming and welcoming to them. As mentioned before, we do have chapters, we do have curriculum. We are a CTE, CTSO, and so we provide competitions for recognition. I'll tell you, if you have no other opportunity than to come to our national conference, to have people who compete at the regional level, the state level, and the best, 2,000 kids who all they believe is that education is their thing to do, that they're empowered to make change, as to make a change in democracy. To have them compete to see who's the best of the best, it's truly, truly inspiring. And I'll tell you something really funny. When I first joined the organization 7 years ago, we were giving these like 3-inch trophies away, and I said, I will personally buy the 6-foot trophy for the winners so they can come back and have that glee moment and say, we want a case for being educators as well. So we have competitions, we have our conference, and most importantly, we are community focused, right? We can be a chapter. All you need to be to be a chapter is to have an impassioned teacher leader and at least one student. And the student pays $10 in national dues, and that's it. And they get access to all of our resources, and they get access to the ability to do scholarships and conference with us. If you are so inclined to choose our curriculum, then our curriculum is for purchase, and it is site by site, and it can be used either as the primary curriculum, as a supplement to whatever curriculum you're already using, or it can be used in a truncated form for after school programming for after school clubs as well. So an important thing that I think is for me to share is we recognize that the problem is big, that we are a small sliver to the solution. And when people talk grow your own, they're usually talking alt-cert programs or converting paraprofessionals or substitute teachers and so forth. But if you can think far ahead enough and say, I can get a consistent pipeline by putting an Educators Rising program in place or something similar, then we're able to kind of whittle that down in a different way. And then while we are a preventative nonprofit, for the district, for the School of Education, we are a crisis solution by being able to provide a higher caliber of student to the university.
It's a program available for high schools for kids to start getting into teaching.
That's correct.
While you're in high school, kind of
middle school and high school.
Educators
yes.
Rising, and you can have clubs and what have you.
That is correct.
And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and listen.
Okay. All right. So as I said, $10 national dues, get access to all these different resources. We have leadership opportunities for the students, and they do everything from testifying in front of Congress on occasion to doing presentations to chapters around the country. Delegates, opportunities. Ahead of myself, apparently. There's an honor society as well. And there are scholarships. We offer 104 different kinds of scholarships to students to help fund their education. There is a video here that I will not make you guys watch, but it is a really cute. If you want to, come to our website and take a look. But it shows the kids at conference kind of doing and being successful and being excited about becoming an education. This picture here is the signing ceremony. So they, just like we athletes do, they sign and pledge that they're going into education. The curriculum itself, in case you're interested in the curriculum, is based off of standards created by the funding came from the NEA based off the national boards and in-test standards. What we feel like makes our standards unique is that we have these cross-cutting themes that we have on the right-hand side, our secret sauce. And every one of our lessons, regardless of which standard it covers, is imbued with these cross-cutting themes throughout all of the lessons themselves. The entire program is split up in domains of you, your students, your classroom, your community, your professional, and then supplemented with clinical experiences and implementation support. And I can get you a copy of the map at some point if you'd like. The framework is designed, originally when we designed our framework, it was, you can do any lesson anytime as you want, because we want it to be so flexible that if you just want to use part of it because you want to supplement what you had, you can do. As we found that teachers are more and more loaded and don't have time to create, as creative lessons as they might have been able to pre-pandemic, we redid our framework to be both flexible and to create a scenario where you can have 5-day, 3-day, and 1-day implementations, where 3 of the days in the 3- and 5-day implementation are guided PowerPoints with notes and reflection and engagement. And then day 4 and 5 are context-based. So how does it work in California? How does it work in your school? And we have created these problem-based learning activities along with assessments to both summative and formative assessments to provide the opportunity for students to reflect on how it affects them directly, as opposed to in an ivory tower. So for us, if you're inclined to want to engage with us, the very first year we treat as a planning year. And in that planning year, the student can automatically, so let me take a step back. There's a loophole in our own policy, which is basically, if there is a state or regional competition, you must compete at those levels first before going to nationals. But if the state does not have a regional or state competition, then any student from that state auto qualifies for nationals. So if you were to start today, you would find your impassioned teacher and find your student and tell the student, for your semester project, I want you to work on preparing for competition. Like, Our competitions are things like lesson planning, impromptu speaking. We also have this amazing one called children's literature, right? Where they actually write a book, and then we have the American Reading Company publish their book, the winner's book. So you can start out right away and do it that way. The other way to do it too is we have a subset of our curriculum that's 6 lessons called Teaching Fundamentals. That is kind of like an introduction to teaching. So it's fundamentals, and allows clubs to have programming, like 45-minute programming once every other month throughout the school year, for instance. And then our curriculum, of course, is available to use. And what we do is we have people do a planning year first to figure out how they're going to fund the classroom, the period slot, and the teacher, and then be able to implement it the following year, and then provide clinical activities. I'll skip the clinical experiences, but basically, there's a preparing, observing, assisting, interning kind of motion to it. We talked about fundamentals already. We do also offer micro-credentials in anti-bias instruction, classroom culture, collaboration, formal assessments, and learner engagement. There are other programs that are out there. Well, we don't need to look at that right now. We've already seen this statistic. And then proof point, one of our teachers, Michael Shaner, is a product of Educators Rising. When he was in school, he was a Future Educators America attendee. He was very active in conference. He then formed his own chapter with a teacher in his school, became the advisor of that chapter when he became a teacher, and then is growing the program for his district. And as a activist in his own right, he has made it so that 21% of his district came through the Ed Rising program. So it is possible to make sure that the Grow Your Own cycle allows for your community to serve itself and provide educators for itself. All right, so that is the end of my prepared remarks, and I don't know if there are questions or concerns or cries of outrage that you'd like to engage in. Any comments?
Hi there, Pat Kennedy with Mountain Empire Unified.
Hi.
When I look at a lot of these things, you talk about the university type partnerships and things, for a lot of rural schools, they're not located close to any universities. How do you kind of bridge that gap?
We have a couple of partners that we're working with right now. There's a online university, Reach University, who's devoted to just teacher certification. There are universities that have brick and mortars that are also creating opportunities for people that don't have a local per se university. And some people we're talking to in that space are talking about how to rethink, who are their child districts for the university as well. So it's early for us in that respect, but we've had to rethink how we work with small. So we don't call it rural districts in our internally, because we found out that the approach that we use for the rural districts is also the same kind of problems that we see in inner city, and they're not the same. But what I'm saying is that you might only have 1 or 2 students who are interested in the program, as opposed to having 20 or 100 students. So how do you combine them together by using technology to say, here's a cohort of groups that can be taught by one teacher theoretically, so that the expense is not so high per individual school? And so that's why we start reaching out to people like Reach, because as we started going to these small school concept, that we need to have the full cycle available as well.
Thank you.
Sure. The question in here is, are CTSO approved in California? We are currently talking. So the short answer is I don't know, because I don't know if we're still active. We're working with the Department of Ed. I have a a meeting that I'm supposed to finish scheduling so we can have that conversation to see what our activity is. At one point in Southern California, we had 47 chapters, 3,128 students, and we were at that time eligible for funding. So we need to make sure that that is still in the clear and go from there. However, just a side note, we actually have a webinar coming up on how to fund our program, even if it's not CTSO approved in some of the states. So Perkins is not the only dollars that can be used towards this. ESSER, ARP fundings, if you still have any CARES dollars left, and title money is available for this as well. Are there other questions? Well, I'd like to thank you for the time. Like I said in the beginning, California is very near and dear to my heart, and we were making a very big impact at one point. And somehow we lost sight of what we were doing and let California not be one of our active states. And while that was not, before my time as CEO, I am very concerned and want to see whether or not we can help. And if we can't help, we're happy to walk away. But I think that there is some opportunities here that we can offer. And the one thing I'd leave you with is this: no matter what program you have, no matter what you decide to choose, because you don't have to use our curriculum, you should consider our community, because the EdRising chapters do not require a lot of funding, and all it is the student membership dues to keep the lights on for that program. And with that, they're allowed to go and engage with all of these other kids. So I'm actually talking to many of the people who provide other similar types of curriculum and just saying, you can just become chapters and don't have to worry about the competition with that. Okay, so I welcome you all to our community. I hope that we are welcomed into yours, and hopefully you'll find that your students join our movement. Thank you. Oh, let me share contacts. So I'm going to put in the chat my email, and I'm going to also put our national outreach director. What's that? All right.